Today I'm going to show you how to get started with Figma. So if you're brand new to Figma, you've never used it before, or perhaps if you've opened it up and you're feeling completely lost, then this is a great place for you to start. And this is going to be part of a wider series where we cover a range of different topics relating to Figma, everything from blending modes to using the Unison tool. We're going to cover it pretty much top to bottom, starting today with setting up an account, logging in, opening your very first file, choosing between FigJam and a regular design file, adding some basic shapes, adding some text, grouping together a little bit on framing, and then all the way through to export. We are really not going to create anything pretty or elaborative today, just something for you to just sort of get to grips with the absolute fundamental basics of Figma. So Figma is a design tool that is arguably the industry standard for the vast majority of design jobs nowadays. So I work as a web designer and social media designer, so a lot of my work is in Figma. And not only is it seamless and easy, but it's a really great way to work with others. It's a really good collaborative tool. So you can bring your clients into the project, they can leave comments, or you can work with other creators and design something together. So it's really handy. As you can see here, look, you've got all these people working on a file seamlessly. So it's really good for that. And that's not just in Figma Jam, that's also in those design files as well. Collaboration is at the heart of Figma. I'd say the second biggest benefit of Figma is its prototyping tools, especially for web designers. If you've built out a full website, if you've built out every single page, you can even go as far as including animations, video content, linking between those pages, linking to external content. There's so much you can do, especially with prototypes. But anyway, let's get started. So what you're going to want to do, if you don't have an account already, you're going to want to click Get Started for free, or that Get Started button. And what that's going to do is it's going to send you an email. Once you put in your email address and a password that you'd like, it's going to send you an email with a link. As soon as you click that link, you're going to open up in the tab. If I just click login, because I've already got an account, you're going to open up in your browser to the following page, or at least something that looks similar to this. I've cleared it completely, so I've got no design files open, but you might see 3 or 4 tutorial-based files, but other than that, it should look somewhat similar to this. So once you've done that, it's kind of the next decision is really how to start or how to open up a file. And that is really based on what kind of thing you'd like to create. So Figma do provide with some really nice sort of templates to get started with, brainstorming and, daily sync ideas, stuff like that. But they're all Figma Jam files. If you want to create your very first design, you're going to want to open up a design file. So the kind of decision you're making between design file versus a Figma Jam board is, are you looking to creatively brainstorm with others, or are you looking to create a design? And in our case, we're going to go ahead and open up a design file. And that then allows me to talk you through the kind of architecture of Figma, where to kind of start looking, flashing tutorials up at me, where to start looking and what each of these buttons actually does for us. So across the top, we've got the kind of toolbar. And if you're looking for that familiar menu that you normally have across the top with your file, edit, then that's all underneath that Figma logo. So that very first button is the Figma logo. Just click on that to reveal a nice familiar menu. So that's everything from saving local copies of the file if you need to, or exporting certain parts of the file, exporting all of your frames to PDF. These are all kind of underneath this menu. From there, we're sort of starting to get into the tools that we're going to use. So move tools, we've got the move and scale tools. We've got framing, selection and slice tools. Under this one, we've got all of our basic shapes, our lines, arrows, and also the ability to add images and videos. Our next one is the pen and pencil tool. We'll get into a little bit more detail on that in a little bit, but also further down the line in the series. We've then got the text tool, which should feel really familiar. This one is a really, really powerful tool. So this combines components, plugins, and widgets. Now, widgets are more relevant for Figma Jam, I believe. But plugins are seriously useful. So plugins are essentially third-party tools that you can use within Figma. So let's say that you're a web designer and you want to fill your page with text and you've got no idea what text to put in it. From lorem ipsum text that can be auto-generated to fit the size of your text boxes to, full-on copy generated by AI such as ChatGPT. These are things that you can do right from Figma using plugins. So plugins are absolutely awesome. Next, we've got the hand tool. What does this do? Does this move us around? I'm not too sure. I don't really use that. And the last one is the comment tool. I do use this one a lot, so this is great for collaborative work. So if someone's, a client, for example, is hopped on board your file, it's a nice way for them to leave comments throughout your work. Comments sort of stick to a certain location. You could sort of say, this is great, and then leave that comment. And now, permanently in that specific location within your design, you've got that comment that at any point you can come in, work on, and complete. So a nice way for people to work together. Other than that, we've then got the way to rename this. So I'm just going to call this tutorial. And then under this little arrow here, we've got some more options all the way through to deleting, duplicating, stuff like that. And then on the right, we've got the ability to share the file, to enter the developer mode, or to preview a particular frame. So let's say we're working on a mobile design, like an app design. If we click the preview tool while that's open and we've set up within the prototype menu for it to show on a mobile phone mock-up, for example, then as soon as we click that preview button, we're going to see that kind of design come to life, if you like. That sounds really cringy, but see that design on that device that we've selected. So moving further down, we're going to talk about these two panels. These are kind of the most important things you'll deal with alongside the canvas, the most important arguably in the middle. So on the left, we've got the navigator. On the right, we've got the design panel. And in the middle, we've got the canvas. So just so that I can illustrate it a bit better, I'm going to click R and add a square just by clicking. Okay, so if you press R at any point, you've enabled the rectangle tool. So it's exactly the same as coming up to the toolbar and clicking on this square. And you can either click, which I just did there, and wherever you click, it's going to place a 100 by 100 pixel square, or you can just start clicking and dragging to place something a bit more custom. So I've got these two rectangles here. I'm just going to move around, so you can move freely around the canvas, zoom in and out. So I'm just going to make these a bit more central. And now you can see on the left-hand side, we've got the navigator. So rectangle 2 and rectangle 1, you can find those individual layers. You can also reorder them, which will make absolutely no difference in this context, but there will be some contexts where that does make a difference. So for example, if we sort of overlay them slightly and give them some different colors, so you can just see the difference. If I now go ahead and put rectangle 2 above rectangle 1, you can see that it's changed the order. So that's kind of the basic part of the navigator. Genuinely, that is the vast majority of everything you're going to need it for is in that kind of example. It is essentially finding where layers are, reordering them, grouping them together, that kind of thing. It just helps you stay organized and find things. Something else I'd like to sort of show you is this. If you click on where it says page 1, you can also have pages within your Figma file. I do believe the second you start collaborating with other people or you share this with other people, that it can impact the number of pages you're allowed. But Figma, as you know, is free. And if you're using this personally, you can add as many pages as you like. I do believe, I probably got that wrong, there's probably a limit, but I've never ran into that limit apart from when I'm working collaboratively. So when I've shared that file with someone else to work with me on, I think limited to 3 pages. But what you can do is click on this plus icon and add another page. So now if I go back to page 1, you can see my layers, rectangle 1 and 2. On page 2, completely blank canvas yet again. So you can use pages to kind of keep things separate. So for example, if I'm working on a website, I might have a page for all of the, the design system, the color scheming, all of the components that I'm going to use on the actual website. I might keep them in a separate page, just to keep things tidy. So let's delete that second page and then come back to our first page. So I'm going to delete one of those rectangles and we'll just focus on rectangle 2. Because now I'm going to show you this panel on the right, which is where you're going to spend, I think, the majority of your time when you're using Figma. So this is the design panel, and you can switch it between design and prototype, but for now we're just going to stick to design. So you should be roughly familiar with these at the top. I think since PowerPoint and Word have been a thing, these icons have been pretty well used. So alignment, so simply aligning it to the left of your document, to the right, top, bottom, middle, the nice easy ways for you to align items, not only just relative to whatever they're contained within, say a group or a frame, but also compared to each other. So if I just get another rectangle again, see, I shouldn't have just deleted that red one. Let's give this a little color. So if I now select both of these, if I click align left, now both of these shift to the left. If I click align right, to the opposite. And if I center them using these two central tools, you can see how they kind of align relative to one another. Now, don't get too worried about what frame means right now, but I'm just going to put this within a frame just so I can show you something. This will make a bit more sense later on. But now these two rectangles are contained within a frame, and we can tell that because firstly, if you drag the frame around, they come with it. And secondly, because if you look at the navigator, you can see that we have frame 1 that contains these two rectangles. Now, select either of these rectangles and you'll start to notice that if we now use the alignment tools, these rectangles now align relative to the frame that we've placed them within. So if you have multiple rectangles selected, you can align them relative to one another, so centralize them based on the position of each other. If something's contained within a frame or a group, you can then use these alignment tools to move them around relative to that frame. Now, I've got carried away because I wasn't going to talk about frames until a little bit later on. But anyway, back to this design panel. So moving down, we've got X and Y controls. So we can move this rectangle along the X and Y axis. You can do it that way. You can do it freehand. It's completely up to you how you like to position things. Again, this comes in a bit more handy when we're using frames and we're trying to be a bit more specific about where things are placed on the canvas. So W and H, that represents your width and your height in pixels. So if we increase the width, to 236 pixels wide, increasing the height, nice and simple. The next two, we've got rotation. Again, should be nice and straightforward. This is in degrees. I'll reset that to 0. And then the last one is our border radius. Okay, so as we bring this up and down, you can see it's just rounding those edges. Again, this is in pixels. And one last thing to note on the border radius, if you click on independent corners, that little button just next to it, then what that does is it exposes each corner individually. So if you see these new 4 controls that we have, that's from top left to top right, bottom right to bottom left, and they're labeled. As soon as you hover over them, you can see which one they each coordinate to. But if I just go ahead and set this first one to 0, now you can see that top left corner has been completely straightened up. There is no rounding at all, and that keeps that 30 pixel roundness on the remaining corners. There's one button I jumped over that I'll just jump back to, and that is this one here, constrain proportions button. At the moment, because you can see there's no link between the chains, if I click that and it turns it into a linked chain, what this means is that the width and height are now locked. Okay, so the ratio of 236 to 136 is now locked in place. So if I start adjusting the height, you'll see that it's also adjusting the width for me. And let's say that we have something that is, let's just grab, sorry, I do another rectangle. Quite often you'll work with, say, 4x5 as a kind of aspect ratio for your designs. If you then lock this aspect ratio and say, well, I know that I want the width to be 1080 pixels. If I zoom out, you'll see that that has kept the ratio of 4x5 because I've locked that in place. Okay, so this is a nice way to kind of constrain the proportions. Basically, rather than allowing you to independently toggle the size of the height and the width, it kind of does them both at the same time and locks that sort of aspect ratio in place. Okay, so the next thing we're going to move down to is these layer properties. So at the moment it's set to pass through. In here is our blend modes. So again, I'm not going to touch on this right now because you just don't need to know it straight away. But further down the line in this series, I am going to touch on these in a lot more detail. But in essence, they're just different ways that that particular layer interacts with the design that it's a part of. Okay, and normally how the lighting or the brightness or the colors of that particular asset interact with the kind of things it's surrounded by or covering, or then the next one we got is 100%. This is just the opacity of the entire object. So if I bring that always down to 0, completely transparent, all the way up to 100, you can see it fully. And we've then got this this eye icon, which we can just toggle the visibility without deleting the icon. So if you see here on the navigator on the left, the rectangle is still there. So just come back and turn it on. Just an easy way for you to hide and show things if you need to kind of dip things out in order to see other things when you're designing. You might use this, you might not. I don't tend to find I use it at all, to be honest with you. But you might. The next section down we've got is our fill section. So this is where we're getting our grey colour from. So D9, D9, D9 is the hex code for that particular grey. So if you know your hex code, you can just click on the text part of this and just type it in. Otherwise, click on that little grey box, or whatever colour your rectangle is currently is what that box will be. Click on there and we've got that nice familiar colour selection tool. And again, we've got the eye. And that's not actually toggling the visibility of the rectangle anymore, that's toggling the visibility of the colour. So this is just turning off the red, and because we've got nothing else behind that, then it's just going to disappear altogether. For example, if I was just to grab another fill, so you can just click plus and add as many different fill layers as you like. So I can layer them. So this is a 20% opacity black, so 0000 means black. This now means that if I toggle the visibility of this layer, you can see that if there's something behind it, it will work. It's not as simple as just hiding and showing the object. Let's move down to stroke. So if I add a stroke, now what we've done here is added a small outline. You can't see it at the moment because I'm quite zoomed out, but if I zoom in, you can just see that black line there. So with that rectangle selected, let's go back to stroke. And what I want to do is just come down to this section here where we've got the line weight. And I'm just going to drag that up to about 30. And now you can see that a lot more clearly. And there's kind of 3 placements within Figma for where you want to put your line. And it kind of depends on what you're designing. So if you're designing something really, really small, you're probably going to want to put the outline on the outside of the line. So the border line. I'll just show you what I mean by that. If I make this rectangle really small with a border of 30 pixels, you can see that we've got, a lot of black and that tiny bit of red in the middle. We might want to still reveal the original shape, but still have that outline on the outside rather than the inside. So if we come down here where it says inside, just click on that. And we've got 3 options: outside, inside, or center. And all that's really saying is, as you can see, this blue line here where I've selected the object, that's the kind of central, that's the kind of outline of the shape that we're working with here. And all we're selecting is whether we want the outline to appear on the center of that line, inside that line, or outside that line. And if I zoom out, you can see you've still retained that original shape and then just put that stroke on the outside. Just as with fill, we've got the ability to add multiple colors and change the color in that nice familiar way. So I've gone here for another red because I'm really tasteful, and above that I've got a 20% black, and we can adjust the opacity of that black here or here. That's completely up to you, and just remove that altogether. So now we're back to that original shape. Okay, so the remaining 2 are effects and export. So effects are nice and simple. We just click that plus icon. We've now got a drop shadow. Now that is the default effect that it's going to add, but there are many. So you've got inner shadow, drop shadow, layer blur, which is going to blur the layer itself, and then background blur, which is going to blur things that appear behind the object. So I'll just quickly show you that one. That's quite fun. So if I was to grab another slightly smaller rectangle and just bring it so that it overlaps with our current rectangle, and just come over to this navigator panel and just move it down, or you can use your open brackets just to shift it to the background and give it a completely different color. What I want to do now is come to the fill color, and now I've got background blur set. If I just click, so whenever you've got an effect added, you'll always be able to edit the effect settings by clicking this icon here. And with background blur, the only settings you get is the amount in pixels that you want to blur it by. So I'm going to turn this up to say 16 pixels, and then come to the fill, so back to here. And if we just start reducing the opacity, then you can see that what we've done is blurred the kind of the background of this object. So anything that appears in the background is going to be blurred. So that's different to the layer blur. Let's bring the opacity back up so you can see what that's done. So the layer blur is going to blur the layer, whereas the background blur is going to blur things that appear behind the object when it's transparent. That's a really important point. And an additional point to make is only if it's transparent using the fill, never if it's the whole object's transparency. So if you set the layer effects to have a 30% opacity, that background blur is not going to do a thing. It has to come from, sorry, let me just put that back to 100%. It has to come from the opacity of the fill. So there's some basic shapes, like I said, you can add circles, you can add lines, you can add arrows, polygons, so you completely, custom number of faces. They're your basic shapes, and that's basically how you style, one of those shapes, add effects and colors and strokes and roundness, all of the basics for creating shapes and styling shapes. The next really kind of common thing you're going to want to do is add text. So what I've done there is I've clicked on the T icon up here, or you can just hit T on your keyboard and you can just start typing. So here we've got the default font, which is Inter, which I believe was developed by someone who works at Figma. It's supposed to be a nice, legible font at all sizes. But if you click on that, honestly, you have no idea how much this has improved. The years that we've been using Figma, and all you got was the name of your font, no preview at all. So you had absolutely no idea, unless you knew your font in advance, what it was going to look like. But now we've got these nice previews. So nice and easy, you can change the font. Let's say with Jockey one. I've not actually heard of that myself. But yes, that's a nice, easy way to change the font. We've got text size. So this again, I believe in pixels. Let's go with something that gives us a bit more. Let's go with pop-ins. So we've got a bit more control over the weight. So in addition to the size, which is here on the right, we have weight. So regular, we've got bold, we've got thin, nice and familiar. And then the italics, which are kept separately. So moving on, we then have alignment. So if you've got, a paragraph, or perhaps this is split across two lines, nice and familiar, our alignment, left, right, and center, top, middle, and bottom. And then just a whole range of other things. So our letter spacing, our line height, and then just extra padding at the bottom of a paragraph if needed. And then just a few different settings for the text box itself. So we've got auto width. Now what this is going to do is, let's say the box is actually currently wider than the text we've got. If you click on this, then what it's going to do is set the width automatically and display the text along one line. If you've got a paragraph and you want to therefore manually set the width of the area that the paragraph's going to fit in, then the other tool that we can use here is the auto height tool. So rather than auto width, we can set the auto height. So again, if this was too tall, we could just click on this and it would come back to the right height. They're kind of the basic settings you need to know in order to use text. There is a lot more here underneath the type settings tool, but for now, that's all you need to know. And again, just as we did before, we can add settings like, fill, stroke, effects, anything you like. Now, one last thing before we wrap up is how to export something you've built. So how to put something together, group it or frame it together, and then export it. So I'm going to show you quickly the difference between grouping and framing, then we'll export, and then we'll wrap up. So what we're going to do is, I'm just going to hit O just to add a circle. And this is really not going to be a pretty design, but I'm just going to add two different colored circles and some text. Just because, why not? That looks lovely. Okay. So you might be familiar with grouping. So at the moment, as you can see on the left-hand panel, these three are completely separate. But if I press Control G or right click and click select group, I've now on the left-hand panel on the navigator, I've got a group. And that now means I can move all of these together. So here they all are, look, within the group. I can then export, because these are in a group, I can then export this by clicking the plus on the export. And this is just a great way to select all the elements of your design and go ahead and render them and export them as your JPEG, PNG, the sort of familiar files that you use. There is arguably a better tool than grouping, and you might find grouping works fine for what you need, but 9 times out of 10 when people use Figma, they start by making a frame. And I'll show you why. So if I click the F button, or if you come up here to this sort of hashtag looking icon, you want to click that. That's the frame tool. And now have a look at what's happened to my design panel on the right. We have so many choices for what to choose as our default, as our frame, right? So let's say we want to design something that's going to fit into an iPhone. Just click on iPhone 14, and now we have this frame where we can put things in that is the perfect resolution for an iPhone 14. So again, I'll click I'll press O to add a circle. I'll add another circle and change the color just for a little bit of interest. So interesting, look. And then what we want to do to export is click on the name or come over here onto the left to select the frame. Easy way to tell if you've got that selected, move it around. If it's coming with you, then you've got it. The reason I say this is because sometimes if I select the bottom circle, if I just move this outside of the frame, sometimes it can look perfectly fine, but actually that circle is not within the frame at all. Easy fix, select the circle, come over to your navigator and just manually drag it back into the frame. So where I was, let's click on the name or select the frame, come down to export, click on the plus, and then you've got your choice between PNG, JPEG, an SVG or PDF. I'm just going to stick with PNG. On the left hand side, we've got 1 times. That's just the scale. So you might want to export this at 2 times the size, 3 times the size. Alternatively, you might want to say, I want this 500W, which means 500 pixels wide. Completely up to you how you export, but 1 times is more than enough. That's absolutely fine. And as simple as that, we're going to hit export. And there we go at the top hand right hand side of the browser, we've got the download that's done. So if I click this, open up the photos, our design should have been exported. Beautiful, look how nice that is. Okay, so that is kind of the basic fundamental parts that you need to know. I did mention touching on the pen tool quickly, which I will just quickly do now. If you wanted to add a shape that's a bit more custom, we can use the pen tool to sort of drag points together and round off a shape, and from there, again, just adding fill and stroke as you want to. Oopsie, fill and stroke. The good thing about the pen tool is you can also click and drag to create curves as you need to. So this is good for making custom lines and custom shapes, but that is pretty much all that you need to know to be able to sort of design the basic things in Figma. So yeah, I hope this has been a little bit helpful. I hope you feel a little bit less lost. Drop a comment below if I've helped, and also if I've not. You know, if there's something you're still lost on and you want me to sort of help you achieve, then just drop a comment below, and I'd be happy to, you know, make a future episode or you know, do something to help. So yeah, next episode we're going to be creating some social media templates together. So some really simple posts that you can use yourself for your business, or you know, just use as an exercise. But until then, I shall see you later.